Okay, here we are in the middle of Act 5, Scene 1, and we notice we're still hearing from Hamlet that they ask, who is this they follow? He wants to know who's the body they're getting ready to bury. He doesn't know, right? He's been gone. He just returned from this trip to England. So they both hide, so nobody notices them at this point. And so you have to keep in mind there's kind of two scenes happening. One is Hamlet and Horatio hidden behind some bushes or something, and then the other is everybody getting ready for the burial. Okay? The priest starts off and says her death was doubtful, meaning there was some suspicion about the nature of her death. But the great command oversways the order, right? So that there are usual rules about who gets buried, but we've overruled those rules in this particular case, right? Whatever the great command was whether it was the coroner's inquest or whether it was Claudius forcing the burial upon the coroner. We're not sure. We don't know. Okay. So Laertes asks, must there be no more done? And the priest says, look, there's no more be done. We've done everything we can. Okay, and then Laertes says, lay her in the earth, and from her fair and unpolluted flesh may violets spring. You get, that's hard for a brother to say. That's hard for any loved one to say. But here he's trying to kind of pay tribute to the cycle of life, and the fact that his sister's body is now going to be fertilizer for new life. Okay, and this is the moment where Hamlet realizes, what? The fair Ophelia? It's Ophelia who died? Oh my goodness. And we hear from the queen. The queen is scattering flowers, and the queen says, I hoped thou shouldest have been my Hamlet's wife. I thought thy bride bed to have decked, sweet maid, and not to have strewed thy grave. So what a poignant scene there, right? Poor Gertrude. She doesn't, nobody knows, I shouldn't say that. She had hoped to be able to spread flowers on the bride bed of Ophelia, and here she is doing it on her grave. So there's a terrible irony. Remember, most comedies for Shakespeare would end in a marriage. Most tragedies would end in a death. Here we are clearly in a tragedy. Okay, Laertes is just kind of losing his mind. Poor guy with grief. Okay, he says, "Hold off the earth a while," meaning don't start pouring the earth over her until I have caught her once more in mine arms. He leaps into the grave, and he says, "Now pile your dust upon the quick and dead." Right, he's the quick, meaning his body is still has the quickening going on. He's still breathing and blood coursing through his veins, and she's the dead. And so he's basically saying, like, bury me with her. Right? He's just in extreme grief here. Hamlet comes forward out of hiding. Okay, and Hamlet acknowledges that he is who he is, and he says, "Look, who is it that is proclaiming his grief like Laertes is?" And Hamlet jumps into the grave, and they start to grapple a bit. They start to fight. Okay, Hamlet says, "Take your fingers off my throat. Hold off thy hand." The king says to them, "Pluck them asunder." Right? The king has a plan. Remember, we read Act 4 carefully. The king has a plan for how Laertes is going to get revenge on Hamlet, and it's not going to happen in Ophelia's grave. He wants it to happen in a way that makes it look like an accident. Okay, so the king's attendants part Hamlet and Laertes, and they pull them out of the grave. Okay, and now you basically have a long scene here where the brother and the former lover kind of share their grief and essentially almost try to outdo each other with the level of their grief. Okay? I don't want to make light of this. He says, I loved Ophelia. 40,000 brothers could not with all their quantity of love make up my sum. Okay? So look at that. I mean, you know, I know Hamlet is feeling this very strongly right now, but to say that in front of Laertes is a particularly cruel statement, I think, right? He's saying, look, there's no way you could love her as much as I did, right? 40,000 brothers couldn't love her the way I did, okay? The king says, oh, he's mad. The queen says, leave him alone, bear with him. And Hamlet says that by God's wounds, show me what thou would do, right? Show me what thou ought to do. Will you weep? Will you fight? Will you fast? Will you tear yourself? Will you drink up the easel, eat a crocodile? I'll do it. Did you come here to whine, to outface me with leaping in her grave, be buried quick with her, and so will I? This really is, I mean, it really is a grief competition with these two guys to show them, like, who's going to show how much we loved her, right? Who's going to come out on top of this? And it's an odd competition, but, you know, I think it's probably a very human one at this grieving moment when Laertes is burying his sister and Hamlet is just now realizing that a woman he once loved and pushed away, and a woman who once pushed him away, that she's now dead, right? They never had a chance to get close together again after that severing. They never had a chance for reconciliation. Okay? The queen says, look, he's just mad. The fit will work on him. Notice what the queen's doing here, of course, is she's keeping Hamlet's secret, right? Remember we saw that in Act 3 in their last encounter together, that he asked her to keep an oath, and she said she would. She said she'd keep it a secret, that he is only mad in craft and not genuinely mad. Okay? Hamlet says some final parting words to Ophelia. He says, I loved you ever, but it is no matter. That's another one of those phrases, guys, that I really think is evidence of Hamlet's growing fatalism, right? That just sort of nothing matters. No matter what I do, it's going to work its way towards its end. Okay? So let Hercules himself do what he may, the cat will mew and the dog will have his day. Okay? So the king says to Horatio, go take care of Hamlet. Hamlet and Horatio leave. Now the king says some words to Laertes and says, strengthen your patience in last night's speech, right? Don't be too hasty, Laertes. We'll put the matter to the present push. Okay, so basically, we're going to immediately do what we had planned to do. What was our strategy for getting revenge on Hamlet? Okay, so then the king shifts his attention and says to Gertrude, "Set some watch over your son, right? Have someone keep watch on him. This grave shall have a living monument. An hour of quiet shortly shall we see. Till then, in patience our proceeding be." So basically, the king is just trying to calm everybody down and say, all right, we're going to do this the right way. We're going to get the revenge. We're going to let Laertes kill Hamlet, but we're going to find a way to do it where it looks like an accident and it involves poison and nobody is the wiser or suspicious. Okay? So that's what we have here from Act 5, Scene 1. Right? We had the comic relief with the clowns or peasants, which, while offering comic relief, also offered us a sense of the weightiness of the current proceedings, namely that the mortality is creeping closer to all those around Hamlet, and that further is reinforced by his recognition that Ophelia, someone he once loved, has died. Okay, so he is in a profoundly grieving emotional state, as is Laertes, and both these guys go through this one-upmanship of grief, and they're soon going to get a chance to one-up each other in a more physical battle. Okay, so that ends Act 5, Scene 1.